if you've got a teacher who's doing something that works with that kid, why would you not have them broadcast that all over your building? You
Exactly.
know, and that's how you start really getting down to the individual student success.
Hi, friend. Are you ready to move into a leadership position? Do you have interests and ambitions that you want to pursue, but feel like you don't know how to take that next step? Maybe you want to start your own coaching or consulting agency. I'm Mel, and I help educators define their career path through correct mindset, knowing your options, and getting prepared for your career transition. I will show you how to level up your leadership skills, share your expertise in a new way, create impact on a larger scale, and put your leadership in motion. As an educator for over 20 years, I started to feel underused and like I had more to give. I knew when the time had come for me to leave the classroom and affect change on a larger level. Now, I'm ready to help you determine where your talents and skills mesh with your passions and interests. Put your leadership in motion and move into that next phase of your educational career journey. Let me help you define your career path by having the right mindset, knowing your options, and getting prepared for that next leadership position. So power up and put your leadership in motion. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Mel Vandevort. Today I have with me Chuck Moss from Virginia. Chuck is an educator, he is a speaker, he's an administrator, he's a blogger. He does a lot of different things where he is located. And I am super excited to have him on the show. I've been following him on social media for a while, and he is always putting out little short snippets of inspiration. And I am just ecstatic to have you on the show, Chuck.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm really excited too because your words of wisdom all the time on social media, it's just very inspiring. And so I just knew that you looked like a guest I really needed to have on.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and I believe that those little moments of inspiration are that's where inspiration happens. Not when you've got to sit and listen to somebody for an hour, although I like that too. But those moments where you can just kind of get a quick 60-second, here's why today needs to be better than yesterday, is what it's all about.
Yes, yes. And I kind of took some inspiration from you and Dr. Darren Peppard, and I've started putting out a very short Wednesday podcast episode every week. And so they're like 2 or 3 minutes long. So that was you and Dr. Darren Peppard who were my inspiration for that. But what I would like for you to do is introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in education.
Well, again, my name is Chuck Moss. I've been in education for, I guess, coming up on 29, either 29 or 30 years. Started out, wanted to be a third grade teacher. I was inspired by a teacher, and then I student taught middle school, and I was like, man, I like this. And so for 8 years, I was a middle school civics and English teacher and taught fourth grade for a year, then back to middle school, where I picked up with English and U.S. history. From there, became an administrator, served in that capacity for several years, and then went back in the classroom right about the time when we were transitioning to smart boards and all this technology, because I was providing it, but I had no idea how to tell teachers how to use it. So I went back in the classroom, got the opportunity to use those things, made me a better administrator when I came back into the assistant principalship. Then I moved into the principalship, first at the elementary level, then at the middle school level. And then I was a director at our school board office here in Dinwiddie. And now I am back in the role of assistant principal. And much like when I went from being an administrator back to a teacher, I'm remembering so many things that I'd forgotten because it had been a long time since I was an assistant principal. But when the chips fell the way they did, the assistant principal was the only opening here in the county. And in order to stay in the county, that's the role that I took. And I'm at a great school, Dinwiddie Elementary School. I'm serving under a principal who was my assistant principal and was one of the best I ever had, and is truly doing a fantastic job as a principal.
Wonderful. That is quite an adventure in your educational career. And that's kind of odd to see the flip in roles between you and your who is now your principal. So,
Yeah. Well, luckily, it wasn't a transition that happened while we were in the building. We had been separate for about 3 or 4 years when this new position came available. And it's actually been really neat for me to see the things that she does that I'm like, I know where you learned that. And it's also redemptive to see that some of what I taught her affects the way she interacts with me, and I feel better about her leadership.
mhm.
So I know that she learned the right lessons while we were together the first time.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Chuck, we're going to talk about building school culture with a focus on student achievement and community empowerment today. So I'm just going to let you take the floor and I'm going to do some follow up and some asking questions as you go along, and we'll just see where this conversation leads us.
Okay. Well, so often in business and everything else, we talk about the bottom line. And the bottom line for us in education is student achievement. In education and business and everything, we often talk about the bottom line. And our bottom line is student achievement. That's where it all comes down to. I believe that student achievement cannot happen in a school where culture has not been built. And when I say culture, culture happens regardless. You can either have positive or negative culture. You
Mm-hmm.
don't build negative culture builds itself. You
Yes.
build positive culture. And so, what can I do as the leader to positively influence the culture of the building? And one of the things that I believe very firmly in is that I've got to eliminate the idea of a culture of permission. If you believe you have something to do that's going to make a huge impact for your kids, don't come ask me if you can do it. Tell me about it after it's been done, and then tell me what you learned from it. Was it successful? Was it not successful? Or were there some things you'd like to do a little bit differently to make it more successful next time? If you started from the place of, I believe this will be right for kids, I want you to go ahead and do it. And the reason is because all I can do is gum up the works if you come to me first
Mm-hmm.
and ask me to permit. Because then, if I'm giving you permission, then you have to explain it in a way that maybe wasn't as organically, it came to you that way. You've got to explain it to me in a different way. Nope, I need you to go do it. I need you to put it in place. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's successful, outstanding. And if it's not, well, that's a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that when we in fact, this is one of the things I'm going to talk about in a couple of weeks, is that when we spend our time looking for the other shoe to drop, it's exhausting to be the person looking for that. And it's also exhausting to be the one who's got a shoe to drop.
Yes.
So, it's time to get rid of that. And that in no way, shape, or form impacts kids positively, impacts families positively, impacts your staff positively. Get rid of those things, eliminate those barriers. As my friend Andy Jacks here in Virginia often says, green light everything. If someone believes they have a good idea, why would you tell them they can't do it? Because unless you're going to lay on some train tracks, I want you to do that for me.
That's definitely a different perspective, because most of the time we think, yes, we definitely have to at least run it by our administrator, especially if it costs money to do it, because we need to make sure that there's funds there and that kind of thing. So
Right.
when you're thinking about that, and we have new and aspiring leaders who are the audience here, and they're thinking, okay, I'm just learning budgeting, I'm learning all the things, I'm learning my job. And then I have teachers who are just taking on these different projects on their own.
Mhm.
What would you say to them about that?
Well, I have yet for a teacher to undertake something that's going to cost some money that they haven't told me about first,
Okay.
because there's always a question where that resource is going to come from. And then you have some conversations about those considerations. These are the roadblocks that are in our way. How will you overcome them? And then how can I help you in that? I remember I had a young teacher who, she was an eighth grade teacher, and our statewide testing scores were not great in science when I came to the middle school, and we were looking at ways to change it. And she wanted to do this community bio blitz, where people came and used their cell phones to take pictures of the different plants and bugs and whatnot that are around our campus, and then it got uploaded to this national database. And so, through participation in this, you are also being part of the scientific record. I'm like, great. And she's like, I want to do this. I said, okay, if you want to do it, we got to figure out when we're going to do it, who's going to be a part of it, how are we going to make sure people are fed, if we're going to feed them, what do we need to do there? And by the time it was all over, she did it, and it was very successful, frankly, more successful than I thought it was going to be. And I said to her, I said, you are like a locomotive for the education of your kids. And she said, if I'm the locomotive, then you're the tracks I'm on. And I was like, that's the greatest compliment I can get. Exactly. I'm the tracks, because the locomotive can't go anywhere without tracks. Right. At least not for long. Right. And so it's my job to help get those tracks put down. And it's my job to
saying, sorry. So what you're saying is it's not that they don't run it by you or work out the logistics with you. They just come to you with a plan. It's more, I don't need to ask you for permission. I just need to come to you prepared with what this is going to look like.
Right. Well, and funny that same group of teachers, and they raised their science scores 13 points in 1 year. Yeah. And it was not because I led a bunch of data meetings. I attended a bunch, but I didn't lead them. They led them. And, so for this bio blitz, the teacher needed to talk to me about all the different, but then it's when everybody first started talking about the drip, your fashion drip. And so they started making this contest, and they called it Came Through Dripping. And it was, what's your drip going to be on your score, on your test score? Who's going to get the highest drip? They didn't ask me about that. I walked down the hall and saw a poster for it, and I said, hey, tell me about this thing. And they did. And I thought, okay. And I'm sure when I first mentioned it to them, they thought, oh, we're in trouble. Nope, not at all. Just explain it to me. How can I explain it to people when they ask me? Right. And then say to them, hey, you know what? Since they initiated this, these kids are scoring higher on their common assessments. Since they initiated it, these kids are really buying into their own education. It's really empowering our students. They didn't ask me for permission for that, but they believed it could make an impact. Yes. And it did. And so those are the things I want people to be able to do. But like I said, when there's resources involved and whatnot, people come to the leader because they're not sure where those things are going to come from. But inspiration comes from your heart. Right. And if someone's inspired to do great things, then I want them to take that step, be willing to do that.
And that's the way we grow our leaders, leaders who are coming up, is we give them that autonomy and we give them that chance to be innovative and to spread their wings a little bit and show what they can do. Plus, they are also modeling for those who are a little bit scared to try something new. We have some wonderfully seasoned teachers, but we have some wonderfully seasoned teachers who maybe don't embrace some of the new things that they can embrace. And so that's a way for them to see, you can do a lot of different things and it's okay.
Well, and we had in that science team one of those wonderfully seasoned teachers who had been through several leadership cycles where, again, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so in a data meeting, I was saying something and she said, no, I disagree with that. And after she got done, she kind of looked at me and I said, thank you for being willing to stop us and make us think about this rather than just nodding your head and then going back to your classroom and thinking, I'm not doing it. Because it gave us a chance to have a conversation. If this is not going to work, what's going to work better? What's going to be more successful? And it changed the way that she thought about leadership because she saw it was them versus me. And I know that to an extent, schools always are going to feel a little bit like that. But it really made her realize that when I said I wanted you to try new stuff and I want you to be willing to tell me when I'm wrong and tell me what's going to make it better, I meant it,
Mm-hmm.
because I thanked her
Mm-hmm.
for doing it. And I did it publicly in that meeting. And
Yes.
so that made all the difference. And it created, again, that positive culture where they didn't go back to their room and sit there and say, I can't believe you suggested that and that's horrible, to I took my feedback
Mm-hmm.
and we're going in a different direction. And that's huge. And talk about
Right.
empowerment. You know,
Exactly. That's what I started to say. It validated her years of experience. And
right,
instead of invalidating her just because maybe she doesn't feel comfortable trying something new, or
right.
she's more comfortable doing things the way she's done them for a while. And,
Mm-hmm.
now she's, like you said, she's vulnerable, or she's taken the chance of being vulnerable, and it was okay.
Right. Well, and I had years of middle school experience, but I had one student teaching semester of sixth grade science for
Mm-hmm.
science experience, and that was in 1994.
Right.
So I needed to listen to the person who had been serving in the classroom there,
Mm-hmm. Right.
for a decade or more, because that person knows more about science instruction than I'll ever know about it.
Right. One of the ways that I find that works to help with, maybe some of the stagnancy that comes along with being super seasoned, especially at the middle school and high school level, more so at the high school level, is that ongoing professional development and everybody being able to lead something that they're good at, being a guru at something and then teaching others. And then it
Right.
just helps them to realize, yeah, we all have something different to bring to the table. I have years of experience, so I have great classroom management, or I am
Mm-hmm.
really good at looking at data and seeing where there are gaps or where we can fix things. And then some of the newer teachers who are just like on fire because, they're new, they have
Right.
more of the innovation and that kind of stuff. And so then we can see, yes, it takes everybody, and we all have different gifts. We all have different skills that we've developed. And now we all get a chance to shine.
And one of the things my principal and I are talking about right now, we're working with our teachers. The book's called Unleashing Teacher Leadership, and we're basically saying, exactly what you just said right there. We have all of this knowledge, all of these skills, all these things you're good at. So how can we do that? And looking at the model of a friend of mine down in North Carolina, David James, what he did with his school, just kind of like they do a weekly PD session every Friday morning
Mm-hmm.
where teachers lead teachers.
Yes.
And it means so much more coming from the person that you sit next to at lunchtime.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've built so much respect for them because of who they are, then really getting to listen to them in a formal presentation, but also knowing that means your leadership values them the same way you do. That means everything.
Yes. Yes. And when I left the classroom to go into administration, I had been in the classroom for several years, I think 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember exactly. And I was that person who loved professional development, but I didn't always get to take what I had learned and show other people, or
Right.
spread my wings and shine in any capacity. And I've always thought, sometimes the model is a little bit wonky and we need to work on
Right.
that. And so that was one of the reasons I was ready to move into administration, because I saw a gap in professional development. I mean, I saw, there were other things I wanted to work on. Student leadership was another passion of mine, but
Right.
that was like one of my big things was professional development. I'm like, I need to be in a different place so I can impact that in a different way.
Right. I've learned there's more power in my attending one than my leading one. Because and don't get me wrong, I'll be the first one to hop up and lead a
Mhm.
PD
Mhm.
if that's
Mhm.
what we need.
Mhm.
but we have a reading specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And that reading specialist, we have the Virginia Literacy Act and whatnot. We're changing the way we're teaching literacy. And she knows more about the nuts and bolts of that than I do. But if I'm not at the PD she's leading, I'm telling the teachers, I don't think it's important enough for me to do that.
Exactly.
And so my principal and I, we have the realities of late buses and things like that and trying to figure it out. But one of us is always in that reading PD. Both of us are there if we can. Reading PD, math PD, science PD, whatever we're doing. One of us always tries to be there, especially grateful when we can both be there. But logistically, that just doesn't happen all the time. But there is always going to be an administrative presence there, and not to take attendance, but to be part of the team.
Yes, exactly. And if you are an active participant during the PD, hopefully it's not just a sit and get session, but if you're an active participant, then that also models that it's important to be a participant during PD and not just do that sit and get or not. And I know this is big time for elementary because I was an elementary principal. Sometimes my teachers would bring work with them during PD sessions and that kind of stuff. And we want to invest in you. And so we want to make sure that we're modeling that it's important to be a participant.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Good stuff. So let's talk about how that affects student achievement.
Sure. Well, if you're going to be innovative and do things to raise student achievement and don't believe you're going to be supported by your administrative when you do it, well, you're not going to try to do it. I believe that students work harder for people that love them. Your staff works harder for people that love them. If your staff doesn't know you care about them, like, for example, if I say to a teacher on Friday, hey, you got any big plans for the weekend? They're like, oh, well, yeah, I'm taking my son to visit a college. Okay, what? Then on Monday, I say, hey, how'd the visit to Virginia Tech go? Or how'd the visit to East Carolina go? I ask those questions because it is more than small talk. If I'm spending time if I'm asking you a question and you're spending your time giving me an answer, I owe you a follow-up. I believe that's true with students too. But with adults, we often say, hey, how you doing? And don't even stop for the answer. And one of the things I talked about the other day was just like, we got to take time to stop when they answer that question. Exactly. Because sometimes how they're doing is 3 answers away from the first one they give you. And you've got to invest that time. And again, kids are the same way. Now, so talking about student achievement, when teachers want to try something innovative and new and different, and they want to get their kids to achieve, and then they want some feedback from you on it, if they believe you're honestly interested in them, your feedback means more. Because when your feedback says, here's what you didn't do, here's what you didn't do, here's what I think you ought to have done. No, instead, when you say, hey, you know what, this kid was 100% on board. Now, maybe another kid wasn't, but this kid, wow. So how do we do that with everybody? How do we get them there? And then we have conversations that are, around the successes that happen, and then how we can bring that success classroom wide. And if it's already a classroom wide success, then that's a person who say, hey, I need you to talk about this. I need you to tell people about it. I need to make sure that other people know what you're doing. And the days of shutting your door and teaching, they're over. Honestly, when people they say, I want to shut my door and teach, that really means I want to shut my door and manage my class. It doesn't mean it just means I want to be left alone. But we are looking at the fact that we have experts one doorway, not one building away, not one webinar away. 10 steps takes you to a place where you've got some of the best PD you can get. And it's for our kids. It's for the same kids that you're going to see. Why would you not share that? And if I know something that's going to work with a kid, because we all know that everybody has those kids in the building, they have a nickname on the radio. And when their name comes over the radio, everybody's hair stands up on edge. And you're like, okay, we got to find them. If you've got a teacher who's doing something that works with that kid, why would you not have them broadcast that all over your building?
Exactly.
And that's how you start really getting down to the individual student success. We do the
Mm-hmm.
reading plans and whatnot to make sure that we're hitting all those notes. Culturally, what makes this kid different than the kid they're sitting next to?
Right.
You know,
And, we tend to equate student achievement with grades or scores or that kind of thing. But student achievement isn't just grades and scores. It's student
right,
achievement can be, hey, this kid made it in the door today, did not fall apart, made it through the morning in class. There are different levels of student achievement. So
right.
I really almost hadn't really even framed it up that way until you said that. And so thank you for that. Even myself, I guess I've been kind of had a one track mind in
Well,
thinking about
and
student achievement.
there are times when I'll say to a kid, "What's your goal for today?"
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me what you want to be when you grow up. Don't tell me what your plans are for the summer.
Right.
What do you want to do today? And I remember I had one particular kid at middle school. I said, I just want to get out of this place. Okay, great. It's 1 o'clock. We dismiss at 2:15. What do you need to do to get there? I said, here's your goal. Here's you. Right now, you're pushing yourself back. But if you want to get out of here, what do we need to do? And so just it kind of became first became kind of a running gag, and then it became just kind of a relationship builder. I'd see him and I'd say 3 more hours. He goes, "Yep, 3 more hours." And it like he knew that I was interested in him being successful in that moment.
Yes.
And yes, I want to see him walk across the stage. But when I'm trying to get you through eighth grade, because middle school is like, in elementary, you got the light at the back into the tunnel. In high school, there's a light at the front of the tunnel. But at middle school, you're kind of in the bend. There is no light unless it's being provided by the adults that are around. And so those momentary flashes of light or things like that, knowing, hey, I want you to be successful in your life. I also want to make sure you're successful today. And I care about that's one of the things I like. I picked this up for doing classes. I like to ask students at the end of the conversations I have with them. I said, "Did I treat you fairly? And do you know I care about you?" And if they say they don't know I care about them, we got a few more minutes we need to spend together.
Right.
Because they have to know that I care about them. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is changing behavior. And you can't change someone's behavior if they don't believe you care about them. Yeah. And so, for me, just making sure that not only students know that I care about them, but that the teachers know that I care about them. It just creates a culture. It creates a positive culture that I want to see. And, Christmas time this year, I did what administrators all over the country are doing. I dressed up like an elf and I climbed up on the roof of our building. The only difference is our building was built during the Works Progress Administration in 1939. So it's a different kind of corner of the building. But the kids remember that. I dressed up as a heat miser one day, and the kids remember that. Later when they have to come in my office and I can say, "Hey, was that a good decision?" They can remember that it's not just those gotcha moments.
Right.
That it's really about I care about this place. I care about making people laugh. I care about making people feel welcome. Today, they make a decision that's going to do the best for you, but what can we do to make a better one in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Our time has flown by. And I can't believe that we have talked so long already because it doesn't seem like it's been but just a few minutes. I love these kind of conversations that are organic and they just flow so quickly. And before you know it, you're like, wow. Since we are at the end of our time, what is one spark of wisdom that you can share with our aspiring or new administrators?
Well, I'd love to be able to talk a little bit more about how community is affected by school culture, but we'll do that another time. If I'm giving advice to a new leader, every day, every week, at least one day a week, go home on time, no matter what.
That is great.
At least one day a week. And that's not something that I've always been able to live by, on my own. But I just, because there are plenty of things that if we get started on it, we can suddenly look up from our desk and it's 6:30, 7 o'clock at night.
Right.
And we'll have plenty of opportunities for those kind of nights and those kind of, investments of time. But, when you go home, I want to get home and spend time with my wife. I want to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to make sure that at least one day a week, I'm saying everything here will wait. Because I never once have I left my office and come back and everything on my desk was done. Ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's never happened.
Right.
So I know it'll be there in the morning. And if it's not, the state testing or special accommodations, it can wait until tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. One of the things I learned as an administrator, but also when I was building my business, was what are your 3 big rocks for today? What are your 3 main things that are non-negotiable to get done today? And then let's finish the others when we can.
Right. Absolutely.
Because the list is never going to shrink. It's going to always grow because you always have more stuff to do. So,
Right.
and as far as talking about community, let's do it again. Let's have another show. I'll have you back on and we will finish this conversation and you can talk about that because this was great. There are lots of nuggets that I took from today. And so I know that you have some more inspiration for our audience. So thank you for that. How can my audience connect with you if they would like to?
Just about everywhere. On Twitter, I won't call it X. Yeah, but
I know
so,
I have a hard time too.
Yeah, but Twitter, Facebook, TikTok for as long as there's a TikTok, Instagram, Chuck Moss EDU.
Okay.
If you just search Chuck Moss EDU and it's got the EDU at the end of it because otherwise you're going to wind up being taken to the landing page of a state representative from Michigan, who I'm sure is doing great work there. But
right.
I'm the Chuck Moss in the EDU space, and
Right,
so
exactly.
I want to make sure
And you're
that I'm
definitely
there.
the one we want to connect with. But for my audience, they know I'll have all of that information in the show notes. So they won't have any trouble getting to Chuck Moss
All right,
EDU.
great.
Yes, yes. Because I don't like for my audience to have to search for my guests. I like for them to be able just to find it right in the show notes. So
Right. Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
And sure, and anybody can reach out to me. I love talking to people. I love talking to inspiring administrators. I love talking to people who are deciding if they want to be teachers.
Mhm.
I love talking to anybody.
Yes.
And so I would love for anybody out there who wants to just feel free to contact me, because the way we empower each other is the way we build our career, build our profession. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I will not be doing it for 30 more. So I got to make sure the right people are coming next.
Right. Exactly. That right there is a golden nugget. So thank you for that, for sure. Definitely. Thank you for being on the show. This has been a pleasure. And I can't wait to finish our conversation and have another episode coming out soon.
Excellent. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for inviting me. And to your audience, I'm proud of you because you're spending time listening to something that's going to make you a better teacher, better educator, better leader. And that's what we're looking for.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much. And for the rest of you, thank you for joining us today. I hope you have an amazing weekend. I will see you back here same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.